going to deal with Ray Ray or how we were going to deal with Shamika. We had to make a decision. And the thing about decision is that there's no way around it. Because even to make a decision not to decide is still a decision.
Amen.
You understand? Even to make a decision not to decide is to make a decision. So when it comes to the comparison between acknowledgement and decision, acknowledgement as compared to decision is the easy part. And what I mean is when I invited you all at the beginning of the message to think about, as I have done with myself, that list of people that have heard us, I know y'all quickly would say, oh yeah, ooh, I remember when and then she did that. That was easy, we did that quick. But there might be some of us here that are still struggling with those people that we envisioned from that list. Some of us are still struggling today on what we're going to do with that decision to forgive or not to forgive, right? So decision is a predetermination that I will forgive the offense and the offender. I will pardon that person. I will absolve them. Now, let me give you a little bit of knowledge and understanding to help us along here as we're dealing with decision. The Greek word for forgive is lifted from the text, as it's lifted from the text, literally means to let go, hence the title of the message. It means to disregard, and it means to keep or to hold on to it no longer, as if it never existed in the first place. Now, my brothers and sisters, in order to do that, one has to be aware of what they're letting go in the first place. And that's not an easy order. Even the decision ain't an easy thing to do. But we got to be aware of what it is exactly that we're letting go of. Are we letting go of the pain, the bitterness? Are we letting go of the friendship? What are we going to let go of? Are we letting go of the tragedy, the hurt? Are we going to let go of the fact that even when I did stuff that I can't forgive myself? Am I going to let go of that? It's the letting go. So what are we going to let go of? Now, when it comes to our text, like I said, we're dealing with money, but the actual text. But the overall gist of what we're talking about are transgressions or violations against us or other people in general. But I was a little curious, because I didn't know what 10,000 talents was. Remember, it said that the servant owed the king 10,000 talents. Now, what I did was I did a little research yesterday, okay? And as of yesterday, the stock market and the commodities market and all that kind of stuff, an ounce of gold yesterday was worth $1,656.10. One ounce of gold was worth $1,656.10. Now, the definition of a talent, it had different definitions back then, okay? A talent could have been a talent of silver or a talent of gold. So if someone said a talent of gold, for example, that meant 200 pounds of gold. Remember, an ounce of gold yesterday was $1,600. So a talent of gold was 200 pounds of gold, and a talent of silver was 100 pounds of silver. So when I did the math, and I thought about this servant, he owed, when I calculated it and put it in today's money, y'all ready? This servant owed his master 48 billion with a B. 48,303,139,490. 48 billion. So even if you say, well, how does that translate into silver? Yesterday, silver was worth $31.09 an ounce. So when I did the math, even if it was just a talent of silver, remember a talent of silver was 100 pounds of silver. That came out to be $4,453,404,124. Now, the first question I asked myself is, what servant am I going to have that I'm lending $48 billion to? But we'll get to that at the end. So let's look at verse 25. It says that he couldn't pay, meaning the servant. He couldn't pay, so his master ordered that he be sold, along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned to pay the debt. That was the master's first decision. So the master acknowledged, man, you owe me some cheddar here. You owe me some loot. And his decision was to take care of this, I'm going to sell you. Now, this goes into Levitical law. Servants were paid back then. Servants weren't as we think of them now, slaves and servants. But what he was going to do is the servant was a hired servant, but he was going to be sold off into slavery to recoup on some of that $48 billion, okay? Now, so this was no laughing matter for the king. And so, like I said, his initial decision was to utterly destroy not only this man, if you think about it, he was going to sell the man, his wife, his children, and everything that he owned in order to get his money. That's how he felt about it. So, at the end of the day, saints, we got to make a choice. And the key is that we have to decide in favor of the Lord. And that brings us to about our final point here. The final point is that as children of God, the decision that we make has to be in favor of forgiveness. We got a choice to forgive or not to forgive. We have a choice of letting it go or not to let it go. But the favor as a child of God that we're all striving to be, and I started out by saying I'm not perfect. I'm working on it myself. But the choice we have to make has to be in favor of forgiveness as opposed to unforgiveness. That is essential. Essential for what, preacher? Essential for my life. It's essential for my health. Here's how we know this. Y'all know the Lord's Prayer? Everybody know the Lord's Prayer? It goes like this. It goes like this. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. This is from Matthew chapter 6. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Right? That's the Lord's Prayer. Now, I wonder, did you catch that? Listen, brothers and sisters. There are only two conditional clauses in the Lord's Prayer. The first conditional clause deals with the Lord himself. Okay? The second conditional clause deals with our will. First one deals with the will of the Lord. Second one deals with our will. He says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. As it is. That word as makes it a conditional clause. So, the first one is, Lord, let your will be done. Do your thing on earth just like you do your thing in heaven, right? The second conditional clause is where it gets serious. It's found in verse 12. And forgive us our debts, what? As we forgive our debtors. In all of the verses in that prayer, in all of the verses of that prayer, there's no condition. It starts off with reverence for God, our Father which art in heaven. And it also asks for us for our will to be aligned with God. And then we somewhat see a boldness as in that prayer we start to ask God for his provision and his protection. Give us this day our daily bread. Deliver us not into evil. Right? Right. But in those 10 little words in verse 12, Jesus demonstrates to us the one thing that we receive is in accordance to how we give it away. The one thing we receive is in direct correlation to how we go about giving it away. He said, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So there it is, saints. It can't be no more straightforward than that. If we want to be forgiven, remember I said this point deals with it's essential. It is essential that we forgive according to verses 26 and 27, like the king did. He forgave the man of debt. He said in verse 27 that as the man dropped down and begged him, please forgive me of the debt, that the king was moved with compassion. Now, the debt was acknowledged by both parties, by both the servant as well as the king. But it says that the king was moved with compassion. And taken together, what that in the Greek means, that word moved with compassion, that means that he was literally from the bowels of his soul, from the very depths of the king's soul, he had so much pity on the king, on the servant, and he had so much compassion on the servant that he completely forgave him of the debt entirely. That's love. That's the love that we have to exemplify, saints, and that's the love that we're growing to. Because if you take the whole thing into context, The servant only asked, when he begged the man, he only asked the king, he said, "King, just give me a little more time. I'm going to pay you back." His intention was to pay him back. The king took it a step further and said, "No, I'm moved with compassion." And it said he released the man. Not only did he not send him and sell him and his family and everything he owned, but he completely, he released him of his debt. He released him completely and entirely of the debt and forgot about it as if it had never existed in the first place. That's love. That's compassion. Now, Jesus gives us that example of how to do it by us looking at the king. There's also an example in there of how not to do it if you read a little further down. For that very same servant, and here's the funny part, that very same servant, just having been forgiven of a $40 billion debt, it says that he diligently sought out with extreme intent in his heart his homeboy, his fellow servant, that he had no authority over like the king had over him. He had no authority. These guys they were equals. They were side by side. He went and found this guy and choked him up for what equates to be $267.18. He choked him. He just got forgiven for $40 billion and went and choked somebody up for $267.18. So when that servant used the same exact words that the first servant, used with the king, he was like, "Please, my friend, have patience with me. I'm going to pay you back this little $267.18. My man was like, no. He threw him into prison. That's the example of how not to decide if you're going to forgive or not. So verses 31 through 35 tell us why it's essential. And Jesus basically backs it up. At the very end, in verse 35 of that very same passage, he said, when Win got back to the king, that the first servant went and choked up the other guy. First of all, what happens is, and I encourage you to read it, there are other servants in play. And they saw how the first servant treated the second servant, and they went and snitched on him. They told the king, "The guy you just forgave is over here choking up somebody for $267. So the king got very angry. And so what the king did is he called that servant back into him. Now here's the funny part. He not only reinstituted the debt, the $40 billion, not only did he reintroduce it, he had him turned over to the tormentors, is what the word says. He was tortured day and night for his inability or his decision to not forgive the debt. Now, and on top of that, so he's being tortured and he's got to pay back $40 billion. I don't know what kind of servant makes that kind of money, but okay. So he had to pay back $40 billion while being tortured. Now, I don't know about you, saints. I don't know if I could go to work every day to earn the money that I need to pay the debt that I have while at the same time being tortured. I think that'd be kind of hard to do. So in other words, this particular servant was a little bit set up for failure because he didn't stand a chance. But Jesus in verse 35 says, guess what? This is exactly what will happen to us, my saints, my brothers and sisters, if we choose or decide not to forgive, not to get over it and to let it go. We will be more harshly treated by not forgiving than the original thing that we owed, that we had done against God in the first place, or the person that we owed. So if I would ask you to line all of this up together. What are you saying, preacher? What I'm saying is that because God, according to his word in Lamentations chapter 3, 22 and 23, it tells us that it is of the Lord's mercies, or forgiveness, that we, me and you, are not consumed. Because his compassion, that compassion like the king had, fails not. They are new every single morning. Our mercy and the mercy and the compassion of God is new to us every single morning. So Jesus says to us, and what he was saying to the first servant in the illustration with the king and the servant, is that how dare you not love and have compassion and forgiveness in your heart towards other people when I have it towards you? That my love and my compassion for you is never dying. How come you